we'll give another minute or two to see if more people wander in.
Clearly and at a reasonable pace to allow for accurate interpretation.
All right, all. I think we can probably go ahead and get started. I don't know where Claire is.
Claire is there.
So I think our agenda is generally fairly open for discussion from the authors was like number one, right?
Yeah. So the agenda typically follows the flow of, bear with me, I have it on one of my screens. So assigning a note taker, any kind of discussions and updates from the authors who have been doing anything in the focus times or in individual conversations, and then any kind of discussions of items or issues. So I know there's been quite a bit of conversation in the mailing list about the ISO standards and how they may or may not impact our work, and then sort of any other items that people want to raise. And if we start with agenda bashing, has anyone got any objections to that order, or if they've got anything that they'd like to add to the agenda?
We have a section dedicated to discussing the profile, and with that, I would like to turn this over to
Okay. We seem to have 4 participants at the moment. Oh, there's a chat, sorry. I didn't see that. Oh, Thomas isn't hearing any audio. We'll just give Thomas a chance to rejoin. Alex, David, John, any objections to the agenda or anything they wanted to mention?
No objections from me.
This might be fairly short and sweet then. Just wait for Thomas to rejoin. And Martin's offline. Okay, we seem to be losing people by the minute. I'll give Thomas another couple of minutes to come back, and we might have to call it then. Okay, we're getting more people trickle through. Just waiting for Thomas to come back and we'll carry on.
See if that works.
Yes, I can hear you, John.
That's good. Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, the tool is not exactly intuitive, although it's not awful either. But the microphone and the camera button on the upper left are what you can use, as well as the raise hand tool if we actually get into a queue, which we won't today. It'll be more freeform. Still no Thomas. Well, in absence of Thomas, does anybody else have material that you want to talk about today that we could start with? Thomas is probably the main actor for the day, but
Nothing for me.
Is there an update on the vocabulary / glossary that we were putting together?
So last I checked, the GitHub repository was submitted as part of the material list, and the vocabulary is just part of that. It's in the GitHub.
Are we confident that we've got a fairly comprehensive collection of terms in there, or is that something that we need to review?
I think we're fine. I mean, Thomas and Dennis both contributed to it, so I think we're good. But yeah, if you want, Claire, you can have a look as well.
I think one of the key things that we should decide are where or how are we going to publish it in the long term. So I think the three options that we have are: one, just leave it in the GitHub repository and we'll be consistent about using it. That's probably not my most preferred. Two, we could actually make it a standing internet draft on its own, and as part of the SATP output, we might need to get permission from the area director to do that and change the charter a little bit, because he noted that it's not in the charter at the moment. That's really not a big ask. Nobody's going to object to putting on a vocabulary document to get that done. And the third thing we could do is include it in the architecture document as a section of the architecture document. But my personal preference, without my chair hat on, my technical chat on, is we should publish it somewhere, right? It should go into a document that everybody can refer to, so we use it consistently within all of the documents.
Yeah, I prefer having it either as a separate document or part of the architecture one. So maybe I can catch up on a mailing list with Thomas and to see if we can coordinate that.
Lovely. Can we assign a note taker to go any further?
I can take notes, Claire.
Okay, thank you.
You just have to do all the talking.
Cheers. Fab. So that's a quick update then on the vocab / glossary. Thomas, are you in and can you hear us well now? That's not a good sign. Thomas, can you hear us at all? Nope. Okay, last call for any agenda items, and then open the floor, I think, for the any kind of conversations from the authors, of which I think Thomas is the only one that's with us today.
Guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, having some serious browser issues. Sorry, was that a question for me?
Yeah, can you hear us? And sort of just in terms of our general agenda flow, an update from the authors. So all of our documents have been adopted now. So if there have been any changes, any communications, and where are we with them?
Sure. Yeah, I can talk about the IETF-SATP core, the error messages that we're doing, and also with the gateway identification work with shipping and with Dennis.
Perfect. And I think we've got Shipping in the room with us, so that's even better.
Should I speak now?
Yeah, if you're happy to.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. So error messages. So you've seen the set of small number of emails back and forth, but I'm working with Raphael and also having some calls with Martin to just go through some error messages and basically right now just collect them, and then we can bucketize them later on. But we looked at using the model that the TLS has for how it describes error messages, and we thought that would be a good model to follow. And so that's sort of work in progress.
Perfect.
Okay, and gateway identity. Shall I say a few words on that?
Yes, please. Yep. Unless anyone's got anything else to add before we move on. Nope. Yep. Please do.
Shipping is online, but shipping, Dennis and myself are on bi-weekly, like our own little subgroup call. If anyone wants to join us, most welcome to do that. But we're discussing a couple of things. First is how to address this problem of gateway identification and discovery. And what's the model? Is it hierarchical like DNS? Is it a large database like the TRISA architecture is using for the virtual asset service providers? And secondly, sub question is are the structures that are available today, such as the verifiable claims and also the DID, is that the suitable sort of vehicle to capture and is that the right data structure to put together for the identity of the gateway at the device level, and also the identity of the owner? And so this is, by the way, if you're wondering why there's this discussion on the mailing list about application to application context and so on, it came from this sort of discussion that when you talk about gateway identification, do we need to also identify or know or convey what types of assets are supported by a gateway? In which case, we need this asset definition. And remember, we talked about asset profiles. So I believe Dennis, who's not on the call, he wants to continue to work on asset profiles as well, because it is going to be needed, going forward. But that's where it is, and shipping. If you want to jump in, please feel free.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, I think Thomas cover all the stuff, and we captured. We try to reversion the current version already expired. We try to renew, update it in the future soon. Thank you.
Okay, so that's on our to-do list, right? Shipping is provide a next update. We know it's not it's not part of the work item list, but it's something that I think the group will need down the road. So in a sense, we could see it as a side project, but a relevant one. And wherever I go, so there's been separate discussions, with a number of what's called layer 1 blockchain systems out there, Polkadots and Avalanche and so on. And the ability to number identified networks is it's not just our problem. Everybody's got that same problem, and this idea of gateways are slowly catching on. So for folks who have not heard of the Monetary Authority of Singapore, they had a 5-year project called UBIN, UBIN. And I think last year or early last year, they produced the final stage report. And, you know, there's this massive diagram, but at the edge of it, there's this block that says gateway, right? And so what they're trying to do there is to provide support for multi-network, multi-blockchain, multi-currencies. You know, this is the ambition of Singapore, is to be, you know, kind of the next Switzerland. But it's interesting that they understand that there needs to be gateways to, you know, be the point where they enforce policies, whether it's asset transfer policies, you know, currency, international payments policies, and so on and so on. There needs to be this box, and they call it a gateway, which I thought was revealing and kind of confirms, at least to me, that we're on the right track.
Okay.
Okay, that's all I have, Wes and Claire.
Okay, thank you. Was there anything more on error messages or gateway discovery, which I know is a slightly out of scope of the documents, but useful kind of context before we move on?
Sure. So I invite people to look at just the stages. So the easiest way I've discovered, maybe, you know, more simpler than what Raphael was suggesting on email, is just to go through every, you know, stage. We used to call it phases, but every stage, particularly 1, 2, 3, and see what things could go wrong. And if you were the IT guy, if you're the engineer that was running a gateway, a set of gateways for your organization, and one or more of them started misbehaving, or the failure rate of interactions increases, you know, what would you do? What kind of information would you need as an IT engineer to figure out what's going wrong, right? And so I invite people to look at, you know, that problem from a perspective of stage 1, 2, and 3.
Is that something you'd like to have a bit of a workshop around, or is that something you think people can do in their own time?
No, it would be good actually if we could have, like, you know, even like a little Zoom workshop, you know, discussion, you know, and so on and so on. I think it would be useful.
Okay, well, we can certainly look into setting something up in terms of a workshop to get that progress ready for review at the more formal, informal interim meetings. Is that something you'd like us to look at, Thomas, or are you happy to set that up?
Yeah. Well, happy either way. Yeah, we could, maybe Claire and Wes, we could take this like offline on email and just figure out, you know, logistics.
So the simple logistics, having just gotten back from a heated discussion with the IAB and the IESG about this particular topic, is that it should be an interim meeting. So it could be a separate one, or we could do it as part of the regular monthly meeting and have more of a more focused conversation where we actually have you know, material to actually go over and review, and you know, we have a full hour, and we could spend an entire hour sometime on just the error handling and go through stage by stage. That's probably the easiest thing to do. But it doesn't have to. So interim meetings do not have to be on Meet Echo. You know, they tend to work well too. We could do Zoom or something else, but officially it has to be an interim meeting to do that level of discussion with, you know, conclusions out of it.
Okay, no, that's good. So if that's the case, well, why don't we shoot for the next interim meeting, or you know, create one earlier before the next date, just to have a full hour on the error messages and just have a discussion. And I don't know how people feel about Zoom. I can provide the Zoom. It's an easier interface, to be honest, with than Meet Echo.
So there's no obligation that we use Meet Echo for interim meetings. We have to, you know, publish it where it's going to be, but we can put that in the minutes and put it in the announcement. That's not really a problem. So.
Okay, now is it too far off? Like the next interim meeting is what, a month, right? Is it like, should we try and have one in a couple of weeks, in 3 weeks, or is the next month okay with you?
that's really up to the people that need the conversation. You know, I would say it would be easiest to do next month, but there's no problem creating another one in 2 weeks, I think is the minimum timeline.
Okay.
I would say, you know, unless,
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
think we might need to do it. We might need to do a call for interest in terms of who wants to be part of that conversation.
Yeah, yeah, or the default is just have an next interim meeting, and we use the whole hour or a large percentage of it just for error messages.
Yeah, and we can update the agenda as soon as we want, really, to say that the agenda for that meeting will be a working group.
Okay, yeah. Why don't we do that? Yeah, it gives the pressure on the authors, including myself, to put the hours in, you know, and get coordinated.
Good stuff. Lovely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I've had a message from Rama. So for those who aren't aware of his most recent updates, I'll skim through. It's quite a lot of content, so I'll share it with the mailing list, but just so we've got the high level. The research on ISO 20022, in summary, so I'm reading as I'm talking, is that it doesn't impact or doesn't necessarily change what we're trying to do. It's more to do with message formats rather than the assets themselves. So John might have more, he suggests John might have more to say, but his understanding is that we do need to compare and contrast a bit to make sure that we are clear in how our protocol is unique, but the ISO isn't, we're not duplicating the ISO standard. And that it probably best situated inside the architecture draft. So an invite for comments on that. And then also mentioned Thomas, you by name, in terms of the multi-CBDC scenario and the use cases. And that has sparked a conversation with Andre, and he will update the document in near time with that. Was there anything you wanted to add to that in terms of he suggests you might have an update to give in terms of the multi-CBDC use case?
No updates from me, but yes, that we want that in the use case document.
Fab. So it looks like the use cases, we're gathering new use cases, so that's grand, and some clarity there about the ISO standards. So I'll share, like I said, I'll share the message, but just to kind of give the high level updates from Rama.
From my point of view, the ISO standard says more or less that you want to do something. For example, I want to send an asset to Claire on your account, given my account, but it does not specify how this is done. It's not a protocol. So, but it has a wide range of assets and facilities. For example, you can have reconciliation of bank statement. You can have payment orders, interbank payment orders, customer payment orders, and so on and so on. It's sort of a general mechanism how they translated the SWIFT messages, which were in arcane format to XML. But
So-
it's not really doing the same thing as we would want to do.
So Martin, would it be possible to use that ISO messaging for like phase 0 or whatever, phase -1 between the applications?
I think you would have to find author messages within or define author messages within the ISO 20022. So I don't think offhand it could do that.
I think it is worth exploring if we can use some of the ISO messaging. I mean, why would we not want to use messaging that's already been agreed and as a standard that's adopted by a lot of the institutions that we're hoping will use our protocol? But it's good to get the clarity that the ISO, and what you said, John, very much mirrors what Rama seems to have said here, in that it's not a protocol, it is more of a messaging standard, with core messaging created rather than a protocol for transfer. So I think we're clear on that, and that's really useful information. I thank you.
Yeah, I think one of John Levine's comments was, could that messaging structure be used even within the SATP protocol, right? Could that be the messaging format so that we don't duplicate something else? There are some tricky elements of how to refer to another document that is normative from these. You know, the IETF doesn't refer to external documents all the time for stuff that is not easily referenced within. So if it's we need to figure out how to. So let me try to enumerate the paths forward, right? One, we do our own thing, just totally ignore it, and we come to justification that, you know, really they're not, because they don't have a protocol, you know, we're just going to do our own thing and use JSON or whatever that we're going to do the transfers, and whatever protocols we're going to use to do the transfers, and leave them with IETF specific protocols. The other option is we could do something that is at least collaborative so that they could interoperate. And I think that that's always a good thing to do, even if the messaging structure is different. We can use the same sort of concepts to make sure that they can align within an implementation. And then the third option, of course, is to actually use their messaging structure and their messaging formats, XML or whatever it is, within the SATP protocol. So in order to do the protocol of actually doing a transfer, are there enough messaging components in that existing, you know, ISO body that we could reuse as the messaging protocol within the SATP result? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. Okay. No, it makes sense. I mean, I see it was at the very least at the stage 0. What triggers the whole, you know, transfer unidirection from gateway 1 to gateway 2 is this messaging thing has occurred at the application layer, and now the gateways know exactly what to do, and this is carrying us. At the very minimum, that's sort of one place where we can interface, we could reuse what they have. But you're right. I mean, if they have a, you know, a message structure that allows us to carry like this, what is it, the lock assertion and the receipt assertion coming back, that, yeah, sure. I mean, so okay, so we'll have to look into that. I don't know if anyone is you know, willing, able to spend some cycles looking at that.
Really difficult because it's an enormous standard. It's really,
it's huge. I know.
It's huge. All kinds of messages. There might be some arcane messages similar to a lock assertion, but who's going to find that?
You know, Martin, is anyone in Swisscom, you know, that does this, you know, for like a daytime
not
job?
Really on. I know a company which would do that. It's Bottom Line. It's an American it's actually a Boston or American-based company. Yeah, you will find. I think the risk of these huge standards is that you will find somebody who tweaked and twisted it to do something similar. So, but it's probably not their realm, and they have a completely different sort of standardization cycle and approach, which is probably multi-year and whatever. So,
Yeah. Okay. So Martin, maybe you and I can go and search.
Yeah,
maybe at the very least, search for somebody who knows who can answer us in 5 minutes. Like, you know, which part of this gigantic standards documents should we, you know, look for this?
Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you, Martin. Let's do that.
Sure.
A comment on this for a sec. A couple of things. Number one is that it is vast, and it's all about, you know, various messages between the banks, and, you know, it's all based on currency, not based on digital assets. Second thing is that they themselves are working on a JSON version of it. So it's a pretty, it's XML generation. So it's very verbose. And they're, my understanding is the same committee is looking at, kind of a JSON version. So if we were going to do anything, that might make sense. And my recommendation would be primarily just look at some of the data field descriptions that they have and, may as well adopt some of them, but not the message structure itself. But, they've got encodings for various kinds of data fields that they've standardized on, whether it be country code or currency code or whatever. And they've got they've done a whole bunch, and that's kind of the approach that that I've taken in a project that I've been working on is if they've got, everybody has to have coding for some of these fields, and if they've already decided on it, may as well just use the same. But I don't think you're going to find anything, in ISO that, that in that standard, in the Swift standard, directly corresponds to what we're doing. And, because it really is about moving around, currency and moving around stocks, but not digital assets. Yeah.
No, thanks, John. That was my understanding, that this idea that if you have a tokenized asset and you do burn and mint, but I like your idea about just reusing the codes, right? Because I presume they have codes to identify not just the bank, a bank, but also what network and what device the gateway is. So if you could just reuse those codes, that would help a lot, I think. But that's a great idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure, there is only one network, and that's the Swift network. So I don't know whether there's really any internetworking sitting there, but there's plenty of codes for all sorts of stuff. So.
There's codes for all sorts of stuff, and there are also other networks. So there, for example, the Swiss interbank clearing network uses the XML standard, the ISO standard, but has different codes for banks. But there's the Swift network, which has a standard identifier for banks. And I think they have some semi-standard identifier for companies and the way, for example, to structure addresses, street addresses, which is not in our domain at all. But they have many sort of codes because they come from Swift, which is full of arcane codes. So I just added the link to the chat about the message definition, which gives sort of an overview what they do, and they have, what does it say, 739 messages about all kind of data. But yeah, it's not really fitting.
Yeah, one would not call it a lightweight protocol.
No, it's au contraire. It's
right.
So probably not right for us then.
There are messages to manage ATMs and ATM cards and stock movements and cash movements, so and networks themselves. So you can do a lot.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then.
The right, if we're going to pursue this at all, probably the right way to do it is to talk directly to Swift. I mean, they do have an innovation group. That's probably where the intersection is, and that they're undoubtedly working on some things in terms of digital assets, but that basically would mean meeting them at wherever they're going next, as opposed to trying to backward compatible to a spec that's been around, they only recently got wide adoption for it, and it's taken them 20 years, because it's basically out of the XML world, but that got them out of the ASCII 80-line world, which is how they were working for 30 years or whatever. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you for that insight. That's really useful. Is there anything anyone else would like to add on that topic? No? Brilliant. If there's nothing else that people want to bring to the table, or I'm happy to move to any other business.
I have something on the SATP protocol itself, and I guess it's an open question, but this is regarding the endpoints of the gateways. So in particular, do we want to keep the endpoints simple, just as in the current drafts, or do we want to propose a different endpoint for each stage of SATP? I guess that's one of the options that I was thinking of. So for example, have an endpoint for the commencement, have an endpoint for the lock, have an endpoint for the lock assertion, and so on and so forth. But that's just a proposal. What do people think of that?
So I can tell you, OAuth 2.0 uses that. So there's an API endpoint for the initial registration, the dynamic or static registration of the client, and then when you're trying to get this access code, then there's a different. This is all REST APIs, but it's got different name in the spec. And then finally, what do you do? Token validation. So we could name each of the stages. We could split by stage. Stage 1 endpoint, or as you said, maybe more relevant is to the the actual weight of the messages. Transfer commence is maybe less weighty than the or is that lock assertion message?
Yeah, because I'm just thinking about potential implementations, and if there is one endpoint just for the gateway, obviously that endpoint will have to be able to handle lots of different messages for every single phase, versus if it's different endpoints, it'll be easier to implement. But yeah, maybe we can take that one on the mailing list, and if people are happy with the suggestion, then we can look at updating the drafts, propose endpoints for each one.
Could I
no, that's a good idea.
Can I pose a potentially silly question?
Yeah.
That's sitting within the scope of the SATP protocol, or is that going into gateway design?
No, it's for the protocol itself.
Yeah, it's part of protocol, Claire. It's just OAuth does that, and not just OAuth. GNAP, I think, does that. UMA in Kantara does that. It actually helps. The other thing, right? Correct me, Alex, is it allows some degree of load balancing, because it's the same endpoint, but actually it's behind it. It could be two different machines.
Yes, exactly, and it's also easier to comply with REST standards as well, if it's separate endpoint.
Thank you.
Cool. I'll propose on the mailing list, and let's see what people think about.
Thank you. Anyone else with any other business that they wanted to raise?
For this, we got this review messages from this Lucas Pardue. I think did we already discuss this, or so it was a lengthy message on April 28th. And one of the points I think where he's probably completely right is that there's considerable overlap between the architecture document and the protocol specification. But maybe I missed something, and that was already discussed once.
No, I've not seen any open discussion about it on the mailing list.
The overlap shouldn't be surprising. and
Yeah.
we can trim down once we're happy with the protocol. We can trim it down. Yeah. But he's right. Yeah, it's not surprising, right?
But he
So a
submitted
little bit
a lengthy comment and review about our drafts, about our use of HTTP and things like that. So, and I think there was not that much reaction.
So a little bit of background on directorates within the IETF. So that came from the HTTP protocol directorate, and normally there's multiple directorates that, there's one for DNS, there's one for the security area, things like that. And their job is to review drafts from a perspective of a particular expertise. So obviously the security area directorate reviews drafts looking for issues with security. So I guarantee they're going to look at our draft. But it surprised me that one came in so early. Normally, they do not jump on stuff until you actually sort of get to last call with, hey, we're actually wrapping up this document, it's ready to be published, and that's when most directorates review. I think that the HTTP group has learned that many people don't get the HTTP semantics quite right, and so they try and jump on early to make sure that people understand it. So, their comments around this draft isn't ready yet. I'm like, well, I responded and said, of course not, right? It's this brand new draft. It's just coming out. But I would definitely, my advice to the authors would be to read that and do take it into very careful consideration. And then there will be multiple reviews in the future. And one thing that we can do as a working group, as a draft is getting ready to progress, is that if we want to reach out to to one of the directorates and ask them, hey, can we get an early review, before it goes out to our ETF-wide last call, to get their expertise. They do support that, and we could ask them, that group in particular, and possibly the security group, to come back and see what the results look like, before we get to the point of, okay, we're really, really, really done, and then to find out at the last minute that they found major holes in our approach. So.
Mm-hmm. So it's completely from a perspective from HTTP. Okay, I see then.
Thank you. Good to raise it and have an open discussion though.
Yeah.
I think we probably need to look at it again and see what we need to change or how. I think it's more that that we are not clear in his mind on certain aspects, and we have the overlap thing is, I think, quite true.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure.
With 15 minutes left, is there anyone else that'd like to raise any other business at all? No? If no one has anything else they'd like to talk about or would like to bring up, then happy to give everyone 15 minutes of their day back, and Wes will share the minutes when he's typed them up, and we will get the agenda changed for the next interim meeting.
The next one will then be on Zoom, or shall we stay on this one? Wes, you said Zoom is entirely possible, so I think it would be easier for some people.
Yeah, Zoom is entirely possible if we're more comfortable with it. There are some advantages of this one. It's more integrated with sort of how the IETF data tracker works and things like that. It can be this, I believe, will be automatically published to YouTube, and that doesn't happen with Zoom. It can be done sort of after the fact if we want it done. But there's some advantages to Meet Echo. It handles queues and stuff better, but we're a smaller group, so that really doesn't matter. So it seems like there is preference for switching to Zoom, in which case I can, or Claire or Thomas, one of us can make a more permanent link. Do we want to switch all future interim meetings to Zoom? Is that sort of the preference that I'm hearing?
Or is it just a matter of getting used to it? It seems to work now once I got the hang of it.
Now that you mentioned the benefits, I don't know.
Yeah.
Sounds okay to stick to MeetEcho as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to stick with this. Sorry, it's just today I was having difficulties logging, but that was all my bad on my side.
Seems
No,
to work
I'm sure
better
you've
on
never had a problem with Zoom, not once, right, Thomas?
Correct. Yes.
Fair point.
It seems to
so-
work better on Chrome. That's what at least on a Mac, that's what I've discovered
Yes.
today. Yeah.
So, I'm on Firefox on an iPhone right now. That's why I don't have my camera on.
One of the other benefits is that MeetEcho is also integrated with our Blue Sheet tracking system, which many of you are probably so new that you don't know what Blue Sheets are, but we used to pass around, we had to take attendance for legal purposes of who actually was in the room. And because the MeetEcho is integrated with the data tracker, you actually get an automated list of who is attending the meeting and things like that.
Just stay with MeetEcho. I'm sorry to bring up Zoom. My
No,
apologies.
no. I'll be honest, I prefer Zoom too, but the weight of some of the other features do kind of, this is, the IETF has spent a lot of actual financial effort to help boost the MeetEcho team, and it's kind of unique. A lot of the stuff that exists in MeetEcho only exists because the IETF has asked for it, even though we're not their only customer. Like the raising of hands tool and things like that. It's entirely us. So. Okay, so it sounds like now there's a little bit leaning toward we'll stay with MeetEcho until we decide that it's problematic.
Good.
All right. Claire's another last call for any other remaining topics. Wearing my Claire hat.
Thank you. It suits you. It's lovely. Fab. Going once, going twice, and everyone welcome to 11 minutes back in your day.
All right. Thank you, Claire. Thanks, Wes.
Thank you very much, and have
Thanks,
a nice
Wes.
day
Thanks,
or evening, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.